I'll try to stick to the script, guys, but I really appreciate you being here. Just more than anything, like there's a lot of experience in this room managing a syndicate, managing investors, just being a part of the venture capital landscape. And I think for the purpose of this call, just us being able to hang out and talk about what are some of those unique challenges and opportunities, um, specifically from like an operational perspective. Be really keen to get some insight and just hear even some of those stories from you, like what you've done to just be successful in this area. Even some of the shortcomings, but then the efficiencies that have followed. So, again, thank you. I know, Murad, it's especially late on your end. Like, thank you all for being here. And overall, like, we'll kind of dive into things like just fundamentals, like core components of what managing a successful syndicate looks like. We'll go through challenges too. We'll try to cover specifically like some investor relations type stuff, but I think as we prep for this call too, just really how do we optimize and be efficient? Because time is limited and these deals move quickly, and ultimately you're building, a business that's based on relationships too. So, to kind of kick things off, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to just kind of let's do a brief introduction, kind of like how you got into venture, syndicates, et cetera, and maybe even like what inspired you to kind of take the path that you're on. So, Helene, do you wanna kick us off?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me, and happy Tuesday to everybody. I'm excited to share the floor with Tyler and Murat because the one thing you'll learn about venture is that it's a job that you learn on the field, not by reading on a screen. So every deal you get better. But my journey into venture started in 2018. I was working in an enterprise tech before that for a voice AI company, and I spent majority of my 20s working at early stage startups and what I call emerging industries, everything from electric bikes to voice AI. And because of the exposure into early stage startups, I really wanted to understand what the capital side of the market was. And I also didn't, grow up with personal financial acumen in my family. And I just like really wanted to learn that. And the easiest way for me was venture. So I launched the fund Journey One. In 2021, and we focus on investing in frontier health and wellness with a focus on software, biotech, consumer tech, and digital health. And my personal mission is to figure out how do we modernize ancient healing modalities. So with the fund, you typically have very specific mandates. Most of your investors invest in a blind pool portfolio. And it's important that you stick with the strategy, even though it can evolve. With a syndicate, there's just so much more flexibility. And so we strategically run our syndicate to help us build net new LPs, hopefully that come into the fund, but also just expand our network and our ability to do deals that we have interest in, whether it's personal, professional, but the mandate's flexible. So I'll hand it off to Tyler.
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. Excited to be here and also excited to hear or learn from the other two panelists. My name is Tyler. I started most of my career in technology investment banking. In the second fund or firm that I was at, we specialize in helping bootstrapped founders of SaaS companies either sell their business or raise growth equity. It's kind of this interesting niche within the startup and venture ecosystem. And what was also unique about the role was that we, as associates, actually tried to source our own transactions. And so we each had like different coverage sectors, and we would basically try to find this needle in the haystack, which was a bootstrapped SaaS company that hasn't raised any venture, over 5 million in ARR. And so all day for a couple of years would try to find these types of companies, and over time just kind of got frustrated with how few there were and how most of the companies that I saw I was really interested in or thought really cool were venture backed. And I knew that I didn't want to spend my entire career in investment banking, but I pretty quickly at that role I realized I wanted to get into venture. So was lucky enough to start at a seed stage fund in Los Angeles, and kind of since then I've really fell in love with it. I remember the first few conversations I had with founders going, how are we not going to invest in this company? Like, the founder is so impressive, the problem they're trying to solve is so important, et cetera. And about a year after that, there's this kind of interesting thing happening in venture, which was SPVs were becoming more popular, and AngelList kind of democratized access to raising SPVs and access to great deal flow. And so I kind of took it upon myself to um, use the network I had in venture and the relations I built in venture to try to create some sort of like inbound deal flow engine from them, while also incentivize them to share opportunities with me by sharing some of the carry. And this kind of became this very collaborative thing. And since then, I've kind of evolved my strategy, evolved my investment thesis, kind of evolved what I focused on. But at the end of the day, would not be able to do what I'm doing without SPVs. And I think SPVs are becoming probably more popular even for some of the bigger funds in the world. And so it's kind of evolving landscape that I think is really interesting. So thanks again for having me, and excited to talk through everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And Murat, how about an introduction as well?
Oh, hi everyone. I am a tech entrepreneur with 30 years of experience with core business of telecom, and work and found a technology company. For me, it's very organic, and also very organic that I am transformed to venture career, and I started in it's about 9 years ago, and as an active venture investor, and today I have about 52 investment, 11, 12 exits, and my current portfolio exists about 40 projects. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, kind of sticking to that, you mentioned the 52 startups, the 12 exits, and more. You know, for us talking about more so from an operational standpoint, I'm pretty curious with that size and that your background. Just curious, like,
Yes,
what unique challenges.
I'm invest my own money, and
Okay.
I'm start as a super angel, and just in this year I transformed to the rolling fund, because business becomes so big that it's not possible to operate alone. And also I'm open Syndicate and Angel Club, MA7 Angel Club, instead to raise money from LPs. And from my point of view, I will try this way, and it's starting very, let's say, very successful. For the just 3 months, we are already have 4 deals with total valuation of this round about 1.6 million, something about this. Yes, and we have target to syndicate every year up to 10 millions, which was allowed me to have investment in each company, which I'm already increase this volume up to 1 million in each round.
So as you made the jump from, like you said, personal capital to more
Yes.
organized, that brings a whole set of challenges to the table. Anything that stuck out to you most as you got the Angel Group, the Syndicate up and running?
Excuse me?
Anything from a challenging perspective, like as you switch from personal capital to now, hey, I represent, X number of investors.
Of course, it's challenging. First of all, it's responsibility. It's different. Mm-hmm. One thing that I'm just risky for my own money, but right now it's many people in my club. It's more than 80 people already, and also challenge that it's maybe not too easy find startups which would be very attractive for many investors, because sometimes I make how to say it, emotional decision. It's my decision, and even sometimes it's risky. I know, I understand it, but it's my decision. It's my money. But when I'm just try to select startups for the club, I understand that it could be a really good one.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's no longer just you. So what exactly are you doing to make those decisions in a more formulaic manner? But I would be curious, Helene and Tyler, like obviously there's a discipline to this. Like what investments do we actually push over the line? And I'll just say it, this is the best way I can think of it. Like, but there's also gut and intuition as well, where it's like, look, maybe we wouldn't, but also based on my experience, I feel something.
Yeah, intuition, it's how that latent experience.
Mhm.
I think it's important to be disciplined as an investor. If you look at, 2021, it was such a bull market post-COVID, and valuations were insane. And now 2024, it's like a lot of folks got crammed down. And so if you're not a lead check writer and getting, uh, preferred rights, um, you have to be careful about like what valuation you're coming into the company. I think valuation and sensitivity is one thing that we think about, and how defensible is the business, but it just also depends on the business models that you're diligencing. Um, they can get benchmarked against other similar businesses. For example, biotech versus a defense tech company. But I think that's the beautiful thing about SPVs is that you're diligencing a company against itself, not against your portfolio. And so something that we think about, like right now in my fund, we're a bit allocated in like FD regulated companies that are non-revenue generating. So for our next couple deals in the next 6 months, we really want to look at revenue generating, digital health companies that are bridge rounds so that we can get a markup in the next 6 to 9 months. So there's different strategies, I think, as you build your track record on what you might need next. And so that's one way we look at
Yeah.
how we
I think
set up our
probably
next
the later the
targets.
stage, the less instinct is probably involved. Like, you're
Sure.
probably not gonna have like a macro hedge fund using much instinct to build out a portfolio in public equities, but obviously as a pre-seed check writer, that's probably well, maybe not 90% of it, but definitely the majority of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think when it comes to diligence, it's every deal matters, and the bigger your portfolio, VCs invest on a power law game, and so it's important to get diversity within your portfolio, even if it's just a syndicate. But also knowing, like, when you choose a deal, do you have product market fit with your LP base? Because if most of your investors are consumer investors and you're giving them this like deep tech deal that's like super technical, it might be the most amazing deal in the world, and your LPs and your syndicate have no idea what the hell you just served them. So, it's really important to know your audience.
Yeah, Tyler. You mentioned something and we kind of shifted into the question I wanted to ask you directly, which was like, as you've been doing this, how are you evaluating specifically for the SPVs? Do we think it's going to do well or not? And so you kind of touched a little bit on one, who the audience is, that obviously matters, but what else is kind of going into that discipline that you mentioned as you're deciding, do we launch this thing or do we not?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's unique to syndicate managers having to go through two steps of diligence, which is, number one, do you want to invest in the company? And number two, do you think that you'll be able to raise kind of within the target amount within the target time frame? And that has been a challenge. I'd say that especially this year, as I'm building a syndicate on sidecar where I have less LPs, a lot of them I'm showing them deal flow for the first time and haven't really worked with them a lot, it's definitely a lot harder to project how much you'll raise, how quickly, from who. And so it's definitely an ongoing process for me. The easiest way to do it, just candidly, is obviously how much signal is there in the deal, who's the lead investor. That's the easiest way to project out how easy it'll be to raise. I haven't done a ton of matching my LP base to my investment thesis. I think over time that will become more and more important and will probably become more and more of what I do. Because at the end of the day, you want your LPs to invest in you, not necessarily just the company. And I think it takes a lot of time for that to happen, but you want them to take a closer look because you told them to. And if you can't,
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of time to build that trust, to build that relationship. But I think it's a really important part of building a syndicate. And it's definitely, for me, an ongoing process for sure.
Yeah, and I think in terms of some of the challenges that I've seen with growing a syndicate is just the standards that you set. So for example, terms, everybody does 2 and 20, but I don't believe that has to be necessary. There are different ways to structure that, and different platforms, I'm not sure what Sidecar has available, can make it easier for you to have different tiers of carry. So for example, we like to experiment a lot with our syndicate. And so we'll offer, 2 and 2.5 and 20. So one-time upfront management fee will pull it, and 20% carry for checks under 50K or 100K. Any checks over 100K, we'll do 15% carry. And so we want to incentivize people to write bigger checks. When you start putting a floor at 500K, 1K checks, 5K checks, then you have a very different strategy of how you're running your deals. Meaning, like, you need volume, because you need volume in how many syndicate followers you have. So syndicates that I've seen do really well with low minimum check size are in the thousands of syndicate followers. And our strategy is actually, we have 100 LPs that have invested across our SPVs, but we go for larger check sizes. Because if you're a millionaire and your minimum's 5K to play, like, I'm going to play minimum table bet. And so that's one thing that I've noticed. And another thing is just understanding who your LPs are. So for our intake process, if you go on our website at journey1.vc, when you apply to our syndicate, we tier off the LP's accreditation level. So for example, someone will say, I'm accredited, I make 200K, I'm accredited with my partner, we do 300K, or I have a net worth of over $1 million. For those LPs that have net worths over $1 million, we give them high priority, high touch in intake. And I'll say, hey, let's hop on a discovery call. And I'll know who those folks are. So it gives us better insights into who our LPs are. And then one of our processes is just understanding, like, what is their background. So we use some tools like humble.ai to do data enrichment. So we've been using our EA to help basically build a spreadsheet of all of our syndicate followers. We'll scrape info online from their LinkedIn and understand, like, what's their background professionally? Are they angels or full-time investors? And how can we better tag them in our CRM so that we know who they are? But there's no platform out there that does this. We kind of had to think through, like, how do we learn more about our LPs? Because sometimes, we currently have our syndicate on AngelList. Like, we have no idea who these people are. And it's not really valuable to us long-term. So those are some ways that we have utilized other tools to better understand who our LPs are.
Yeah, that's good. And Murat, I'm curious, because geographically speaking, you're on another side of the world right now. So your investors, the angels, you mentioned both a syndicate and an angel group, angel club. what are you finding that's helpful as you're not only meeting and growing that network, but then also showing deals that, I'll just say it, are maybe in a completely different part of the world from where the investor network themselves is possibly located.
Even it's really different part of the world, but it's still American company because they are registered in American entity.
Mm-hmm.
It means that actually I have to invest mostly in Russian-speaking founders from CIS countries, which live everywhere, and have many companies from Ukraine, from Kazakhstan, and even Russian before war.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually really said it's a strong society, and mostly all syndicate which we already done for company which operate in a US market.
Gotcha.
And of course, how we can start to make a syndicate. First of all, it's built to strong personal brand and base it on the exciting track record. And after that, we just have many requests for co-investment. And we have minimum requirement for investors 100K, and sometimes it divided to a few projects, at least 10. And some of our investor invest 100 per each round, 200 up to sometimes even 500. And yeah, and
so we've been talking specifically about like, okay, deals, the investors themselves. This kind of plays along to that, but like what is making a deal marketable to LPs? So like it's growing. We talked about you're building a personal brand. You want them to trust you. Also, though, like it's got to be it's got to be a good deal. There's reasons for that. So, um, this is more of a group question, but what is making a deal marketable to your LPs? What specifically are those things that stand out?
it's co-invest in startups which already make choose. And as I said, I have very good track record, and it's also it's not too easy maybe access for our angel to some good deal in US market, and this is really right channel. And also we provide not only access to the deal, we also make some educational cases.
Okay.
And it's very helpful and for angel. And also I'm teaching in angel school for beginners and so on and so on.
That's beautiful. So you're really like you're building this angel club and syndicate side by side. They ultimately are interwoven at some point as those angels continue to get that education, participate alongside deals, even if they can't invest today, and so on.
Just how to set soft landing in the industry, just how to start not losing money.
Yeah,
And I think
minimum requirement 100K, and we divide it in 10 startups. It's quite secure.
I think another thing to take in consideration is like, where is the market? So in my opinion, pre-seed, seed stage deals, depending upon the sector, are pretty hard right now. A lot of investors are liking growth stage deals because those companies have traction. So they're less risky. And there's different categories of industry sectors that are super hot right now. I would say climate and AI, anything. And so people are really looking for exposure. But on a more fundamental basis, what I've found with our specific LP basis, like cap table strength, does this company already have a tier 1 VC that's leading the round? And when we think about what's the benefit of a tier 1 VC, if they have dry powder to do multiple follow-on rounds, not just one, when the company needs a lifeline, like, can they extend that easily? So it de-risks our ability, because our firm, you know, we don't always exercise pro rata, and we don't always follow on. So we want to make sure that if it's not us, who else can help the company finance? And then also just being last check-in. I find it really hard to run a syndicate when you're like the first check into the round, even if the terms are set. And it also creates urgency with our LPs to be like, you know, we've got like $500,000 left for the last check-in, the founder needs to close, because people won't like prioritize the deal unless you tell them there's a reason to, because life happens. If they're an angel, it's not their full-time job.
Right.
And I think manufacturing urgency is, you know, we do actually 2 tranches of raises. So we'll offer, I'm kind of experimenting with, like, say we have, you know, 500 LPs in our syndicate to market a deal to. We'll take the first 200. We'll take the first 100 as ones who've invested in our deals before and give them priority access to fill the allocation. Then we'll give them 2 weeks to close. And then we'll open it up to the other 400 LPs, and we'll say, you know, we have 3 weeks to close, and maybe the first, you know, the first 250K will give maybe like discounted carry on to close faster. So those are some other ways, because I think that if you keep a deal open for too long, you know, that can signal challenges, but it's also just like, how do you create people to like say yes? So we'll have, you know, an informational webinar with the founder so that the LPs can find some sort of like relationship and like, oh, I can trust this person more, outside of just reading on this investment memo what this deal looks like.
Right.
Yeah, I think I've had the most success, like, quote unquote, like selling deals to LPs where you can point to a previous investment that you made in the past and talk about sort of whatever unique insights you found on that particular market then, and why that is driving your investment thesis for this newer investment. I think having some sort of historical experience in any given sector, where you think you have a unique insight and have a developed thesis on why this company is filling that and why the founder is right for that company, I think helps.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you mentioned, and I'm going to come back, Tyler, to kind of that last point too, but this idea of like preferential terms. How do we build urgency, et cetera? Also, how do we give I'll just say it, like an advantage to those that are in the fund that we may be running along the side. You know, like, do I really want to collect carry on them and at 2 different points? And that is something that the Sidecar platform will do, is like you can send out invites at a bunch of different numbers if you needed to. But Helene, I think this pilot, or whatever you want to call it, this testing that you're talking about, that is something that I hear more and more about. This, look, for the first X dollars, or for any dollar that comes in over this minimum, here's what we're willing to offer to help drive that I'm getting a deal, or urgency, or yes, excitement. And then also promoting it so that, hey, we do fill this up in that first week or two, because I think by the time you get to week 5 or 6 of an SPV being open, you really start to see that steam starting to lose. I think right now, most deals close within like that 2-week time span. Obviously, things move quicker than that, and 3 weeks isn't unheard of, but for the most part, like, these things are moving pretty quickly. And to kind of flip that around, where are you guys using, what tools are you using to do soft commits? Like, before you launch an SPV in the first place, how are you organizing what interest is actually there from those, you know, Helene, I mean, you just said 500 members, like, that's a lot of emails. So how are you guys organizing that currently?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, there's some syndicate bases that do like for example, like Jason Calcanis, a syndicate, they'll only spin up an SPV if they get 250K in commits, to signal that like people are willing to invest and it's non-binding. And so we're trying to move into that, but there's also deals where like we don't have many resources to manage the marketing end. So we'll just launch a deal, but if a platform could help us do that intake process, like we have an intake form that's like submit your interest into the deal. Once that person submits their interest, we'll give them a link to the deal page to like complete their investment. And it's like we're trying to automate each step because it is an operational pain in the ass to do. But I think ideally because the syndicate, like even when you're trying to negotiate with a founder, they're like, how much do you want for an allocation? And you're like, I don't know, like, let's see how it does in market. And like, that's a shitty, it kind of, it's hard to not know how much you're going to invest. But I always tell founders, like, I just don't know what it's going to look like yet. So we're trying to solve that problem. How do we gauge interest before we put in the work to set up an SPV? But an interest form is probably the base way to do that.
Yeah. Do you guys have any thoughts on that, or even how you're actually doing it today?
I haven't really figured out the soft commit piece. Definitely something I need to figure out and need to work on a little bit more. But yeah, probably type form probably be a decent way to do it. I think there's a couple other tools out there, like Velvet AI. I think is working on something similar, and yeah, ongoing for me.
Yeah, it's a great product discussion that we're having right now internally, because we have what occurs right afterwards, the actual deal launch. So to have investors with profiles and invites, a lot of that framework is already in place. So it's an exciting prospect for us to say, okay, I've heard 25 different ways that people manage this: type forms, Google Sheets, Asana, Monday, this site, that site. Dealum is another one that just came to mind. Like, there's so many tools, but ultimately you're just adding one more, arrow to the quiver, of all these tools and logins and platforms that you're managing. So I absolutely agree. Like, it would be something that'd be really great for, AngelList or Sidecar, whatever the platform happens to be, to actually build that tool out. But yeah, just
and I think one big challenge that we personally have is pipeline management on a deal. So for example, we're talking about top of funnel before the deal is even active, and you're trying to see who's interested. Once you've marketed the deal, there are 0 platforms that can tell you where that LP is in their decision-making process. And so one thing that we've created is like stages to figure out, okay, we're going to track everything. We're going to put everything in a DocSend space so we know exactly how many times that person has looked. That means that their status is like engaged. And then if they submit the interest form on whether they want to see the deal, we won't share any. We'll start to like only share the preliminary deck, but we won't share our memo until they fill out the interest form. And so now they're much more engaged and interested. And then once we share the memo, we have an automatic email that says, like, are you ready to invest? And then we'll automatically send them a page to the deal page. So that's kind of how we create our funnel. Because you could solicit a deal and send 5 emails out, but if you're not tracking their steps and you have no idea if they're just looking at the deck to learn or if they're actually like looking to invest. And so pipeline management would be like a huge benefit feature for, fund admin for syndicates.
Do you feel like that question, that topic in itself about the deal and the ongoing management of it also relates a lot to LP management as well? Just like, what are we doing? It's not just like this open-ended, hey, we'll just blast this out and see what happens. Like, there it does come back to what is the relationship with these LPs look like. There's some sort of a pipeline mechanism there too, right? Like, are we talking to them specifically about this deal? Are we catching up about reporting for deals that they've invested in? Is it, Tyler, you earlier you said like, hey, we're building a brand, like they trust me, but that takes effort, that takes X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
For all of you, really, like I'm curious, what are those shining stars, those North Stars that you're looking at when it comes to, damn, how do I really build this where I can trust that these people are going to be consistent over time with me, and it's not just like a tire kicker situation.
I mean, I think it comes down to performance and trust. If you have gotten LPs in companies that have performed well and have maintained a relationship built on trust, then I think over time they'll reward you, and you can build a brand. But I think if you don't optimize everything around those two things, I think it's difficult. How you do that obviously kind of depends on, I think it'll kind of be on an individual basis or investor by investor, but I think those are definitely the two most important things.
Yeah, I mean, I think about engagement strategy if this is like the topic. And so there's engagement with your LPs offline. Sorry, not offline, but like when you're not running a deal. And there's the engagement strategy of when you're running a deal and how you think about nurturing those LPs. So for example, we're actually, because we're focused on frontier health and wellness, we're running an event during SF Tech Week. If any of you folks in the audience are in town on the 11th, I'm happy to extend an invite. And so we're building community around like the things that we care about. And so we're doing a guided social sauna experience with a small workshop on like the difference between like Western and Eastern healing modalities and how that can help us make better decisions as investors. You talked about gut and intuition, and there's also cognitive decision making. How do you decipher whether or not one is valid or invalid? And so it's just something fun that we hope that people can connect with each other on a personal level outside of like, happy hours and dinners. So we're starting to launch events. And then when it comes to, deal engagement, it's doing webinars or sending out information about, the company that's not just the deal memo, but like the sector. So we're trying to get smarter around like how do people respond to the marketing that we send out on a deal, and not just like regurgitating like, hey, did you look at this email? Hey, following up. It's like that's not very interesting, especially when like busy people who are angels, maybe part-time, get like 50 emails a day.
Yeah, I think that's $1 million question for sure. To kind of that point, something that I personally think is gaining more traction, and you said, hey, outside of like food and drink, is it's like, hey, I want to build trust with you. Like, I'm the one that's running this. I'm inviting you to these deals, etc. But also, like, I want to help make connections for the people that are in the community as well, because then it's like, hey, I'm not the sole point of, does how well does this grow? If you're kind of tracking with me, like, I think if we all kind of like put this into different terms, like, hey, we're all a fan of this, like this player on a sports team. But then we go to like some sort of community engagement function. It's like, well, I have a lot of friends that are also fans of this team as well. And you start to build like these relationships with each other that ultimately they do center back into this syndicate that they've joined, that they're participating in. Um, and education, Murat, to your point, I think is a big part of that too. Like, it's not always about the deal. Like, is there a oh man, I'm losing track of the words here, but is there another reason I'm
Definitely.
participating?
We are build community and
Mhm.
networking. It's a very important part. And I am seller, and we establish some tech venture regatta where the people come in just for a week, whereas we are racing and read some lecture about venture capital and so on and so on. And not only about from our side, also from some founders, and we are mixed. Also, we have some very helpful exercise when we have some request from our angel, even after meeting with founders, they request extra meeting with me and my team, whereas we make analysis why we make decision to invest in this particular project, detailed analysis, and it's very helpful to collect money and explain how we really make decision in the real project. It's like a study case by case.
Yeah. I am interested to kind of pivot this to like, so we've talked mostly about the investor relationship piece and how does a deal, what makes a deal good, or worth investing in. But something that's coming up more and more is just the aspect of like co-syndicating, working with other syndicates, other deal leads in themselves. Um, what does that look like for all of you today, in terms of, is this worth working on? Do I bring capital? Do I bring introductions? How do we align from like a fee standpoint? Like, are we splitting this 50-50 down the road? Um, just curious what maybe your guys' either past experience or things that you're evaluating currently might look like for partnering up with another deal lead on a specific deal.
I think it's one of the most important things to get right as an SPV manager is how do you co-syndicate? Because I think it's a huge tool for growth and meeting other people that are doing something similar, getting into great deals, accessing LPs. I think it's the most important thing to get right. I think it's also the easiest thing to get wrong.
Okay.
And it probably takes a little bit of trial and error. But it's definitely something you should, if you're someone new to being an SPV manager or syndicate manager, it's something you should be careful about, but also excited about. And I would talk to somebody who's done it before.
I
To,
think
to kind of, oh, sorry,
Tyler,
go ahead.
I've watched Tyler build his syndicate, and so I'm curious. What's an example of the structure of a best co-syndication that you've done? And then because you said, it's easy to get wrong, it's easy to get right. And then what's an example of a structure, a deal that like it just didn't pan out, and how did you structure it exactly?
Yeah, I mean, so there's two different, like in my mind, there's two different co-syndications. There's one which is on AngelList, which makes it just kind of takes out the complexity of it because you're just sharing carry. There's kind of people have been there and done that. It's a programmatic thing. It's going to be a 50-50 split. Where it gets a little bit more complicated is when you're doing double A or SPVs. And so I think that's where you can get into some complexity, some challenges. But at the same time, like you can also do the same things that are the same for the same reasons that make sense to co-syndicate on AngelList. You're getting great deals, split economics, meet LPs. Really, just the most important thing to learn is that you need to be able to sign the economic split ahead of time, especially if you're the one that is raising an SPV to invest in the primary SPV. That's the gist of it. You just have to be careful. And I think it's also really important to, if you don't have a direct relationship with the manager of the primary SPV, I would get a few references about that person before working with them, or I would err on the side of not doing it if you don't know the person directly, haven't worked with them in the past, or can't find somebody that will give you those references.
You said double layer economics. What is that?
A double layer SPV is just you are raising an SPV to invest in another SPV that's direct on cap table.
Yeah, that's messy. So we just started experimenting with co-syndication, and I didn't like the result. And it also was, we sourced the deal, we diligenced the deal, we pushed it live on our syndicate. And I guess the question to ask yourself when co-syndicating is like, what are your goals? Our goal is to build our LP base. It wasn't necessarily to like raise as much money for the SPV. And so how that drives how we made a decision on it is that we want to co-syndicate with someone who is willing to send their LPs our way. So we didn't start off doing 50-50 economics because we already launched the deal and started raising for it. What we did is that we voted on, okay, on this date, like October 1st, any LPs that come to the pipeline will split 50-50 with you. And so we gave them a unique link that we could track. And then we also gave visibility when the deal closed to make sure all these names on this list, like we attribute carry to you 50-50. I think that just like was a bit annoying. There's other structures where, a syndicate lead can give they can get 80% of the 20 points. If you get to keep the LPs. And so there's a lot of different structures. And I'm curious, Murat, like what other ones you've done or what you've played with, because you mentioned you've done co-syndication.
What kind of indication?
I think you mentioned you've co-syndicated with another syndicate before in a deal. Is that correct?
Not understand.
So if Tyler and I wanted to join up and syndicate a deal together, we would, figure out what economics we would do to split that. But there would only be one SPV. So maybe I misunderstood, but
No.
yeah, I guess Jeremy, what do you guys have built at Sidecar to help with the ease of co-syndicating deals?
I was gonna say, by the way, it is super easy on Sidecar too. The only added complexity I meant was just the double layer SPV. So having two SPVs, it's like functionally very similar to, or very easy to do on Sidecar. I think you just have to be careful about getting the agreement signed ahead of time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, carry share agreements are something that we paper at any point in time during the deal, after the deal, next year. Like I've even seen those arrangements where it's like, anyways. But the point is, so that's one of them. We don't require that the person you wish to share carry with is a part of the SPV either. And I think one of the items that comes up on a lot of calls that I take when people ask, well, hey, who can I send it to and how can I do it? A lot of times it starts to look like, hey, I want to pay this person based on how much money comes into the SPV. And that's where I think things get a little gray and you're like, okay, well, look, you've full discretion to share carry however you wish to. And we'll then just paper based on whatever the arrangement is. X amount of capital was raised. Okay, then this percentage is this many points is what you're going to share with this person. But I mean, we see it frequently. And then even when you talk about an SP, like a double layer SPV, an SPV into an SPV, that's like a walk in the park for us. I mean, we are going to ask for a little bit of detail about what the other SPV is, where it's located at. Is it on AngelList? Is it on a different platform? Is it at somebody's law office? Is it on our platform, which makes things even easier? But I think I'll double check with you if there's something specific I can touch to. But broad terms, like co-syndicating with someone is pretty easy. One point I'll make too before I wrap this up is I think there's a lot of room for it though when it comes to okay, we're talking about making things transparent for both parties. And you just mentioned like, okay, we use this link and then we tracked it this way and that way. Like you can do that on the platform as well. Like you could set up multiple invite links where at any point in time you could check, okay, here's how many investors came through this, how many viewed it, how many agreed, what's the total capital raise. Like you could check all of that. But from a industry-wide platform perspective, I think the ability to give deal leads, to give syndicates the ability to work together more easily is, I mean, I think that's like a 5-star idea. And ultimately, like, what do we want to do? Like, we all want to do more deals and we want to build our networks. And so putting that on a platform to allow you to do it more easily, like it's a no-brainer, but you do have some like confidentiality, fee sharing, reporting, and privacy things that just you got to figure out before you can go like, full in on it. Which that might actually bring up a big part of like you mentioned this 80-20 thing where it's like, hey, if I work on this deal with you, but you're willing to introduce me directly to the LPs, what kind of pushback have you gotten on those types of conversations, Helene?
I mean, I'm not looking to get introduced to them. It's more of, I mean, once they land in my SPV and close the deal, I'm going to try to learn who they are.
Yeah.
But I'm still at the stage of like, I'm not sure what recipe makes, what formula makes the most sense. It just depends because, you could split economics with another syndicate 50-50 and you drive 85% of the checks that close, and that sucks.
Yeah.
But
I think
I don't know.
it depends on like what phase you're at in building your syndicate. Like if you're just getting started and you have a great deal, I wouldn't feel bad about giving up 50% or even more of the economics if you knew that you're, say, co-syndicating with Morgan or Zach at Calm where they have like 4,000 or 5,000 LPs. It's going to be worth it for you to do that. If you're a bit more established and you have a great deal, you just want to raise some extra capital, I think that's where I'd be a bit more concerned about giving up too much.
Mm-hmm. And that's where actually to your point about giving up too much, that's where I'm always like, look, we can paper this as soon as the deal is done. We can put in like a preliminary doc. It's like, hey, this is what we'll aim to do. But then once you know exactly how much, Tyler brought in to the SPV that you're running, then you can actually figure out, okay, so if you brought 85 and he brought 15, like, okay, so the 50-50 doesn't quite work there, maybe. Here's what that carry share should look like. And that's actually one of the reasons I like doing it in that method is it's just super flexible. Because yeah, nobody wants to feel like they did a deal and got the wrong end of it. But for sure, where you're at in establishing the syndicate will definitely determine, okay, what am I willing to do in itself? I just kind of always feel like the biggest thing I've pulled out of these conversations when it's about co-syndicating has always just been about privacy. That seems to be the one that comes up the most because you are putting like, I mean, you've said so much today about like, hey, we're being like careful and we're diligent and we're really putting in this time to curate this investor network. And so it's like I don't want all of that work to just like go off into the wind. And so anyways, that's the thing that I think I've gleaned the most from these conversations is how do we not step on each other's toes, but still be able to work together? And then obviously the economics matter too, but yeah, a lot of minute details that have, I think, lasting ramifications. So as a platform, we're trying to be careful of that, but it's it's on top of our minds. So I think to kind of like wrap this up, most of what we talked today just relationships, building the syndicate, how do deals functionally, like how do those work? Um, I'd be interested if there's any sort of like, hey, if I'm meeting with somebody, they're interested in building a syndicate, like what is that piece of advice? Even if it's you pointing to another resource, but what would that, I would just say that I don't want to call it silver bullet, but what would that advice be? Say I reached out to each one of you and said, hey, I think I want to do this. Like, what's the first thing that you tell me?
Anyone else want to go first? I can go. I would say,
Thanks.
number one, if you can, I would try to do it full time. I don't think there's a substitute for kind of giving it everything you have with all the resources you have and all the time you have. And number two, I would be careful about getting too into deals to where you forget about the business side of it. I mean, I think a lesson I've learned is that, at the end of the day, you're running a business, you have to treat it like a business, you have to do all the normal administrational tasks that you would any other business, even if you are heavily focused on deal flow and trying to get the best companies and building a track record and reputation. At the end of the day, it's a business. You have to treat it like one, and don't get too caught up into deals.
Yeah, mine would be set a target for how many deals you want to do in the next 6 months, because you only grow your syndicate by doing a deal. And also really just think about how you grow your syndicate base. So whether that's like educational content on how to be an angel investor, and then soliciting them for, we do these kind of deals, or here's another syndicate, just do that. One way that we grow our top of funnel for LPs is whenever we do like referral agreements to LPs that have closed in a round. So for example, one of our last deals, we gave like 30% carry for introductions that were made that ended up closing to that LP. And so we would only give that to LPs that invested in the deal, because they would have more clout on the referral. And that organically, even if they made 20 intros and 3 landed, we just gained 20 new potential contacts. And so like there's a way to keep growing that, and we're constantly experimenting. So yeah, just focus on just doing deals. I mean, before I started my career in VC, I had 0 contacts that were investors. I had no one in my family that worked in finance. And so it definitely is really effing hard, but it compounds over time.
From my point of view, it's very important to make very detailed due diligence, particularly legal. Very often syndicators not take care about this in detail. It's mean.
Yeah, those are all great. Well, we'll see what happens with me. I'll take that advice to heart. And overall, like I really appreciate you all joining today. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. But really, thanks for sharing your time, your expertise, even the pitfalls, the things that just haven't quite gone to plan. And yeah, hopefully we'll do one of these again here shortly.
Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Happy to come back.
Guys.
Thank you, Jeremy. Take care, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys have a great rest of the week. Okay.
All right. Thank you too.
All right,
Take it
guys.
easy.
See ya.
Cheers.